right, everybody, welcome to Sam and Scott are watching Watchmen, the show where we watch the HBO show Watchmen. I'm Scott.
I'm Sam.
And this is our finale episode, possibly for the series, definitely for the season. We're going to wrap up everything for you, tie it up in a nice bow, and then throw it into the cable wonders. Sam, why don't you tell the good people where they can find us?
You can find us on Nerdcyclopedia.com where you see all our links. Mm-hmm. We have our links to our YouTube channel, which you're watching right now. Make sure you are subscribing and telling your friends. Absolutely. Make sure that you are following us all over social media at Nerdcyclopedia. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and also on Instagram.
Yes.
Make sure that you are subscribing to our podcast, because we actually do audio podcasts as well.
Yeah.
On Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio. We are on Stitcher. We're basically anywhere that you hear at Spotify, anywhere that you listen to your favorite podcast, we are there. And most of all, make sure that you're, emailing us at watchingwatchmen@nerdcyclopedia.com or nerds@nerdcyclopedia.com.
And today is a little bit bittersweet for us, and I'm bummed. I'm really bummed because, one of the things, if you haven't heard it, they're not going to do a second season yet. They don't have an idea good enough, I guess, or they're just not ready. So this is it. The story we got is the story we got, and we have to satisfy ourselves with that. And we are here to tell you what we thought about it in general, in total, though I think you got some of that. To start us out, Sam, how do you feel this show was as a successor to the graphic novel?
Oh, man. So I've been thinking about this a lot. While Damon Lindelof and the company weren't the original creators to, these cast, these group of characters, well, they were creators to the group that the present group and the 2019 group, like Angela, Looking Glass, some other folks, Pirate Jenny.
Who could forget Pirate Jenny?
But the world wasn't created by them.
Right.
So would you really look at it as canon or just maybe fan fiction for, something that, wasn't really created by them? If you want to really just look at it as like a sequel to what was out there before the original graphic novel, I thought this was the best possible thing that could have happened to, that original graphic novel, because in my eyes, I thought that was what Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons, and John Higgins did originally, as me and Scott talked about on our original podcast.
For a long time.
For a long time. Like a lot of podcasts. So make sure you go back and listen.
Check those out there.
We did a lot of good podcasts and everything on those original 12 issues. It was sacred. Like, how could you even do a sequel to it, or how can you continue these characters? DC came out with the before Watchmen, and people were in an uproar. It's like, how can you touch these sacred characters when Alan Moore is not even involved? How can you even tell their stories when they have no involvement? Alan Moore put a curse on anyone who else tried to touch his those characters, saying that it just couldn't be done. But Damon Lindelof was a special case to me. I first got exposed to his material with Lost. The journey on that was excellent. The ending to me was great, but to others it could have been, left a little something to be desired. I think it's a half and half type thing. And then, followed him over to Leftovers, which was really good. See, the season started off okay, real dour and down and everything, but the last two seasons were excellent material. So with that being said, the Watchmen, it came to be something that really holds a real, good special place in my heart as far as this series and as a sequel, as a continuation of the original graphic novel. I can now go back and read those 12 issues and look at this as a continuing story to round out a whole arc that I didn't know needed to be told. It was a great way to expand and continue the story, because even after the book closes on the original, Alan Moore graphic novel, we know that the world still goes on. So it was a good way to tell the story.
I thought as a successor to, I thought it's a successor to the comic, that the show was excellent because it did everything the comic did, in the sense that it challenged our sensibilities and it wanted to rewrite what an origin of a superhero story was and what a superhero motivation was. It took things from the sort of black and white DC universe of the Silver Age and the Golden Age of comic books, and it lampooned it in such a way that it completely made you reevaluate all of those stories. And I think that the TV show that we've dissected and digested and regurgitated and degurgitated and recited here, this TV show does that as well, because it changes your perception of all the events of Watchmen by essentially saying that just growing up as a certain type of person in America at a certain time was like having a superhero origin story.
Right.
And that is a profound statement in and of itself, because, the idea that a superhero has to be an exceptional person with an exceptional experience, and what this show did is it said, no, this is an exceptional person with a far too common experience.
Right. All right. Oh man, yes, great way of putting it.
And that changed the origin of all of the superhero characters in this story, and in this universe that's created here, the Dr. Manhattan, Ozymandias universe. That's an accomplishment in and of itself. And to do it in the way this show did, with just A+ episode after A+ episode, is the type of thing that, the reason we are going to lament this being such a short-lived series is because there's so much more richness they could go into. It's so deep. And it's the same reason we lamented the Watchmen comic book being a limited series for decades until they decided to do something more with the property. So it is an echo of the graphic novel, not just from a story perspective, but also from an effect perspective, which is something that good art can do. And ultimately, because we're left with a limited series, that's the only meat we're going to get here, I think that it even deepens the effect because of how it mirrors the original release of the source material.
Right.
I thought that having the first masked Avenger style superhero being not just portrayed by a black man, but character-wise being a black man, right? Having that inversion, and the first superhero being portrayed as a black person and by a black man says so many things about, the fact that has been controversial, I guess I should say, as opposed to just being a story twist that we discuss on its merits, says a lot about where we are as a country. And again, that is just something that good art can do that bad art isn't able to do. And I don't mean to say bad, I just mean to say not transcendent. So like Battlestar Galactica, for instance, right? Awesome show, right?
Yes.
Doesn't make me question the fabric of the society I exist in. I don't think that...
No, not at all.
Yeah, I don't think
anybody's some deep moments on that show, though.
I mean, it's a good show. Not knocking it. That's the thing. Like, this is another show I like. I wanted to compare it. So these are two pieces of media I feel positive about. But what makes Watchmen superior is that it is able to hold a mirror up to, to our society, to our world, and do it in such a way that it makes you question, the things that are wrong with the world. If you try to fix them in the wrong way, you know what I mean? They can get much worse. It can get much worse. And that's an incredible accomplishment for an 8-episode television series based on a comic book that has been read by literally everybody.
Well, that's essentially what the original 12 issues did. It held a mirror up to the world and said, this is what's going on, guys. This is what's happening in the world. And while it is a fictional universe and there's no such thing as superheroes, you could take a lot of what Alan Moore and them did and Gabe Gibbons and them did and put it up. I mean, the original graphic novel, 12 issues, went on during the Cold War. Went on during the 80s, Reagan administration and everything, and it reflected a lot of that. This series did the exact same thing. There's heightened stuff, with like the current administration, and people, talking about race and culture and everything. Right now it feels like the country is like more divided now than it ever was. Paranoia is just at its height. Everything is just, it just feels like something is going to happen, something's going to explode, which is the same exact paranoia that happened back then, back in the 80s and everything, because, people just felt that it was a nuclear war was bound to happen. And as Scott, as you know, when we read back through those 12 issues, those 12 chapters, we felt the escalation going from, the murder of the comedian all the way up until when the Squid Attack happened. It was constant escalation all the way through those episodes, and the feeling of tension. It was tension. It was events and stuff that just kept happening, and escalation happening. Same thing with this series, and same things was happening nowadays. You feel escalation happen. You feel something is about to happen or explode, or something has got to give. In order for things to, pan itself out. And Alan Moore was using the superhero genre, excuse me, as a way to comment on that, and as a way to, put like a fantasy out there. What if a squid alien attack happened? Would everybody, put down? Would everybody put down their arms and actually unite and work together and everything? That's a really great question to ask, because it makes everything seem trivial, to the point where, you're making all these nuclear arms and all these weapons of mass destruction and everything. How much does it really mean in the end if all of a sudden, none of that matters? This series was asking, this HBO series is asking the same thing. How much does race really matter? Race matters a lot when you put the context of a person, taking the time to actually hate. Taking the energy to actually hate and think of themselves think of themselves better than another person, to the point where, I'm sort of losing my train of thought. But this show did a lot to comment and mirror everything that happens back at you as far as society.
I think that, you talk about escalation. And we talk about the way the story is structured, like how the graphic novel started with the murder of the comedian and went all the way up until, bodies everywhere, right? Bodies beyond your imagination. Which, again, is just a reference to another thing. I don't think it's funny that a lot of people died in the story. So, this show was an escalation. This show started out, if you look at the first episode of this show and you only watch that, which I think some people must have done. I mean, my wife only watched the first couple episodes. I mean, the questions we were asking after the first episode were like, who killed the chief of police? Like, who murdered this guy, Don Johnson, right? It's so pedestrian when you consider that at the end, we're thinking to ourselves, is this woman now possessing of the types of powers that allow her to reorder the atoms of the entire universe at will?
Universe at will.
And that has just exploded out. So now, and, I want to say this, that for me, the delight in this series and what makes it such an excellent piece of media is that the characters that existed on the page were just done justice to in tremendous ways.
Yes.
Everybody, even Hooded Justice, who doesn't have a lot on the page, is just brought to life, and not just in this 4-dimensional character. Right, we see everything, even his time perspective and time. I'll say this is a funny story. So we were looking for something in this room right here, my wife and I, today, and she came across my notebook for I think the 3rd episode or something like that. And there's all this commentary about Lori Blake, and it just says Lori like a bunch of times. Lori's this, Lori that, Lori did this, Lori did that. She was like, "Who's Lori?" And you seem to really want her. And I'm like, "Oh man, this is the TV show." I'm like, "You didn't." I'm like, "You should have stuck with it, But it was so I really love that character. I really love the portrayal of Adrian Veidt in this show as an unhinged, strategic genius, to the point where he's able to to come up with his whole plan and plan to try to keep his sanity on, the moon of Jupiter. That fails.
And the thing is, it's like, because of the horrific crime he committed, the horrific crime he committed in a graphic novel, so horrific, because he thought he was just trying to save the world and everything, but in essence, it was a crime. The karma that came back on him in this series was such a great arc, such a way to bring it back home and everything. Look and laugh at Adrian. You know what I'm saying? We were looking to see him as more pathetic. You know what I'm saying? More to the point of where, okay, this guy did this. This is the guy that did this horrible stuff in the graphic novel. Killed 3 million people with the squid. He was the genius that did this. He's nothing more really than a man. At the end of the day.
Yeah. I think that the portrayal of Ozymandias is the slowly losing his mind, and the way they presented it by just showing you every year on the anniversary and just not holding your hand. That sort of media, hilarious jokes, and just brought so many layers to the portrayal that I think, and not to pick on Zack Snyder, but it's a juxtaposition. There was this, he was an effete character in Watchmen, right? He was above you, but he wasn't as driven. I couldn't feel his this unending desire, this unending determination, and I felt that in this show from Adrian. He will go to any lengths whatsoever to get what he wants, and I believe it in an instant because the portrayal is so good. So,
Jeremy Irons, he did such a wonderful, commendable job with this character,
mostly by himself. And here's the crazy thing. So everybody thinks Ozymandias is a genius and going to say and world saving and the smartest man in the world in the graphic novel, right?
Yeah.
And he tricks the world and murders 3 million people, right, to save the world. But he fails, as we know here, right? In this series, he's portrayed as comic relief and losing his mind and out of touch and wacky, and he's played up for laughs. And he does save the world, literally using the weapons he made to trick us into that he'd saved the world previously.
Yeah, right.
So it's the ending echo of that, because if he hadn't schemed that way, he wouldn't be there to stop his daughter, right?
Right. Yeah.
His genetic daughter from surpassing him. And here's something interesting. I'm reading a book about the end of the Roman Republic. It's called Rubicon by Tom Holland, who's not the Spider-Man actor. He's a historian, a very good one. It's a narrative history, and I'm drawn to the comparison between Julius Caesar and Caesar Augustus, right? His heir, his grandnephew, and thinking about the comparison between Ozymandias and Lady True, because Lady True outstripped her father vastly and had vastly more holdings and was vastly more successful and intelligent than her father. And to me, I was thinking about what would Octavius, what would Augustus say to Caesar in 15? He'd say, you shouldn't have been so direct or something like that, right? He would have critiqued him. He'd have said, no. That's not how you should have done that. And I get that out of Lady True, who's a character obviously that didn't exist until this series.
Right.
But I could feel the depth of her vendetta, not just against Dr. Manhattan for not doing more to save the world, but against her own father.
Or against her own father,
that.
Right.
Man.
Yeah. She was rejected by him.
Absolutely rejected. And then he's cynical enough to just swallow it and be like, oh, I guess Dr. Manhattan forgot about me. And he would have known, I love that flashback scene where he's talking about how would I lose my memory? And then Adrian tells him how to lose his memory, and all of a sudden Dr. Manhattan's missing. He's like, oh, I guess, he probably put the one-on-one together on that one. I want to talk about Laurie Blake in detail.
Okay.
I want to talk about her as a really just excellent character, and I feel like she's been rescued from the source material for me.
Yeah,
I feel like the source material. About that. She portrayed her as a damsel in distress too much, and obviously everyone looks like a damsel in distress next to John Osterman. That's just fair.
But when you have like what was it like the six or seven main characters were all men,
mm-hmm.
and well, five of the main characters were men, and then Lori was the woman.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a central character in that story. Granted, you had her mom and everything, but really the focus was on Lori. So yeah, it was that sort of like it was, and I guess back in the '80s, it was things were different as far as way females were written. So when you're talking about she was rescued in this, yes, it put female to the forefront in this series.
All the female characters were excellent, and all the toughest characters were also female characters. Angela, tough. Lori, tough. Lady True, tough. Both BNs, right? Very tough. I mean, it was excellent from that standpoint, because one of the critiques of Watchmen, like you said, is that the women were portrayed sort of as eye candy and unnecessary to the comic booky stuff that was going on, right? So I feel like in some ways the show has redeemed that shortcoming of the graphic novel. I'm still thinking this is excellent. If you tell me they're gonna take 10 years off and make another series of this, I'd be excited. I am just sort of crushed that they're not going to make it anymore, but I know they're going to do more things like this. And then we're going to see more from diverse voices now because of the success of this series.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about that.
So the way he put his writer's room out here together is that, number one, he didn't accept that it was going to be all white males and everything, just crafting a whole story. He, number one, wanted it to be definitely diverse as far as more female. You got to see more female directors in the show. Of course, more African American, Asian descent of, just basic diversity as far as the whole writer's room, just to make sure that the story that he was trying to craft or put in his mind, as far as Damon Lindelof is what I'm talking about, was the right story to be told, on screen and everything. So people will be able to challenge his sense of beliefs and everything. It's sort of... And it's been a lot of great art created over time and everything. Alan Moore created good art. But do you think it would have been even better if he was challenged by a person or challenged with diversity? Because if we go back to the novel, really the only person of color in that graphic novel was the boy, the guy reading the comic, the pirate comics on the newsstand and everything.
Right, Bernard.
Bernard. And also we can't forget about Rorschach's psychiatrist, psychologist, and everything.
Doctor.
Doctor and everything. So really, those are our only two portrayals.
One of the things about the show that's cool is that it explains that to you, right? Well, why aren't there any black people in the Minutemen? Ooh. It's like the answer to that is unsettling. It's like America was way too racist.
And it makes sense. It makes
total sense.
Yes, it makes sense. I can accept that, And that's sort of like retroact, a whole story to give, like you was talking about earlier, hooded justice, whole arc. We got a whole arc on a big character, from the graphic novel, and we have a whole arc of why he came to be and how important he was, as far as, just the Watchmen and, costume heroing period and everything. He was an inspiration to a lot of things that came to pass, an inspiration to Ozymandias.
And all of this vigilante violence is an echo of the vigilante violence of Tulsa. The vigilante attack in Tulsa, it's all, it's an echo of this white supremacist violence, and we see this sort of vigilantism and we see it all tied into white supremacy explicitly by this show.
Right.
Explicitly. So, seeing the hens come back to roost, so to speak, the roosters come back to roost for the Tulsa racist elite was a super interesting choice for sure. And really, really awesome. It's not easy to call your shot like this and make something where you can set that whole first 20 minutes again, showing the lengths of the depredation and the lengths of just the senselessness of that violence, and taking the time to really hold your hand and say, this is important to the whole rest of the story, and not really saying it why directly for 6 episodes, but telling you why, because you have the cultural center, and we have all these I don't know, scars that this violence has left behind that run through the entire narrative, so that you don't have to be told how this connects to Angela directly, but when you are, it's still exciting and interesting.
Right.
And it's still presented in an unreliable enough way. Like, we still hear 2 hooded justice stories in this narrative that we didn't hear in the graphic novel, right?
Right.
We still see that brought to life. And that doesn't even get into, like, Looking Glass, who is...
Yes. I mean,
his perspective on just the 1985 incident is so interesting.
Yeah, the psychological effects that happened that happened with him, and the way he had to deal with that trauma is the underlying theme of the whole, Watchmen series, period. But Damon really wanted to express that in his version, of the HBO show and everything. And we see when Laurie talks to Angela about trauma, it's a way of having to cope and deal with, your pain and everything. So we talk about Looking Glass, we talk about how the way he deals with that, and what happened with everything that happened in Hoboken and his experience with the psychic blast, and having to deal with all that. And now he's afraid of a Squid Attack. I mean, that's how his whole life is built around. His whole life is just imagine that, and then imagine if you were told that was a lie.
I mean, even if he had not received any actual psychic damage from the squid, the full 10 out of 10 humiliation that he experienced at the same time all those people were killed would probably be enough to make him phobic anyway.
Yes.
So the fact that we know that there is real psychic damage being done to Wade here, and that it is all being tied together, explains the obsession so perfectly. And
not just him.
Mm-hmm.
He went to a group. So it's a bunch of other people out there that's going through the same exact thing.
Yep. And so, portraying that as, again, the echoes of Ozymandias, and who's the echoes of the Minutemen, who's the echoes of Hooded Justice, who's the echoes of the Tulsa Massacre, and showing how that came all the way home to roost in Hooded Justice and the death of the Nazi elite of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the murder of the police chief, and the death of John Osterman, which would have to be a world historical event. It's interesting to me, and this is something I was thinking about today, that John Osterman was pretty much born in 1930 and died in 2019. So he just lived a normal human lifespan.
Yeah. He
had all of this power. He had the power to do anything he wanted with his will, and he never aged, but he did live. He wasn't Methuselah or anything. He didn't live for 500 years. He wasn't a vampire. He died at 89, which is a good age.
Right.
It's an advanced age, but it's not an age that would be insane for a particle physicist to make.
Right.
That's not a super dangerous occupation, although, of course, the show and the comic prove that to be false. Very dangerous for him. There's so much to talk about, and so much to reflect on, for sure.
Let's reflect a little bit on the expectations of people, what they thought this was supposed to be like from the very first episode. It was very controversial to start off with, the Tulsa, Oklahoma, killings and the massacre and everything. So, it was a lot of interpretations by a lot of so-called Watchmen people or lovers or whatever. This is not my Watchmen. It's a woke show. It's too political. Or this is not what it was going to be. Let me just ditch out of it. Let me just not finish watching and everything. Shame on you. Shame on you. Have a right to turn your TV off to things that you don't want to see. But to judge it based on one episode, it's just not fair. It's basically just looking at someone. I'm looking at you and saying, okay, because you're white, I think you're a racist. I'm black, so that's it. That's just what I think. So I'm not even giving my, a chance to getting to know you, getting to dig deep in you. I'm not asking you questions. This is this is the interpretation of what people thought this series was. Mm-hmm. So once you got to like the third, the fourth, or fifth episode and see exactly what it was, especially when Laurie Blake walked into the scene.
Oh, yes.
And it was a great compliment to everyone, who were, novel to see that, okay, this series is what I thought it was going to be. I just had to wait for it.
I think people tune in expecting to cozy in to their memories of this instead of being confronted with the actual text and the subtext and what Alan Moore would Alan Moore certainly is not an apolitical person. He definitely didn't write this to be apolitical.
Right.
So the idea that the show was going to be apolitical or should be apolitical, it wouldn't be as good, first of all, because it wouldn't have as much to say.
Right.
The other thing is people were like, I mean, I'm not kidding here, dude. There were people out there that were like, why would you show this why would you make up this terrible thing and open the series with it?
Oh, yeah.
To make people look bad. And it was flabbergasting to me because, one, I wasn't aware, because I was a history major in college for a while, so I had to, took a lot of American surveys. This is something they talked about in those classes. Mm-hmm. So the people weren't aware of this was something that was bizarre to me. I didn't understand why people were calling it controversial. I thought it was because of the gun control stuff with the cop, right? Like, I thought that was way more pokey than just saying,
oh, yeah, that was small potatoes compared to, okay, this really happened? The Tulsa stuff really happened? Are you serious? Let me look this up and actually see. Then all of a sudden you got these articles out there, about Tulsa, Oklahoma, such, that just actually happened. But granted, Scott, a lot of this wasn't really taught in, like, the history in schools and everything. And, it wasn't really directed to, and also to what happened back then after it was, well, as a history, history major and everything, a lot of the history was buried.
Yep.
It was buried. So right after the massacre happened, they burned a lot of the stuff, as far as all the history and stuff that's just still even coming out, that we're just now finding out, So yeah, why would you make this up? Because it's in a fictional universe and it's sci-fi and everything. It's considered you're just making this up. This is just another, we know that Damon Lindelof is a liberal or whatever. So it's just another way to use the media, this media platform, as a way to propagandize his feelings and everything, by making this whole story up. Some people still are probably thinking that it's still just made up stuff.
I think that the other thing that's important to point out is, one, this is a real thing that happened, so you can't get mad about the portrayal of a real thing that happened. And if you think that the level of violence that was displayed here is inappropriate, read any account contemporary of the sack of any city ever. It is as fulsome and awful as was portrayed.
What they showed on HBO was tame compared to what actually happened.
Yeah, they did.
So they couldn't. You couldn't even really fan them. This I believe it happened over a span of
it's Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
Like they picked a long weekend so they could keep it going. That's how evil this was. Yeah. This is something I want to point out. So this is anchored in a real flashpoint, right? A real thing that happened in both our universe and the Watchmen universe, right?
Right.
So the flag that Will wraps his future wife in, right? Mm-hmm. That is not the American flag. That's the Watchmen American flag.
Right.
Which means what it's saying is that even though history diverged before this is in the divergent timeline that this has happened, that human nature still makes these things happen. It's a commentary on the universality of the idea of the other. And it's interesting also because that's another echo of what Ozymandias is trying to do. He is trying to force, by creating an external threat, by forcing humanity to recognize an other that is outside of all of humanity. It forces humanity to say us is every single human being. So it's an excellent parallel.
Yeah, excellent
parallel.
Mm-hmm.
And like that, this is the fulcrum on which the entire plot of the graphic novel turned.
Right.
And to see it being used this way in the series is just Excellent. It indicates that the people that made this show have a firm knowledge of the source material and a loving knowledge of the source material. And that is something that I appreciate because you don't often see that in a for-profit production is the way I'll put it, right?
Yeah.
Money, right?
Yeah.
And that's fair, and they should, but you know what I mean.
Right. Well, HBO had the unfortunate to Alan Moore, they had the foresight to realize they needed to, I guess, make money off this property. Yeah. So they needed to, but they couldn't figure out a way to actually do it. And to their credit, they knew they couldn't do what happened with the Zack Snyder thing. Yeah. Some people loved it, some people thought it was a debacle. So you decide on that.
Some people thought it was like, man.
But they some executive was fortunate, had the foresight enough to look at Damon Lindelof and express, ask him, okay, well, do you want to handle this? Because we think you have the passion and the talent to actually, work this out. And fortunate for us that he did.
Yep.
Because he completely understood and was able to make other people understand, this material and everything. And when you really look at it, it's as complicated as it is, and as complex as it is, as far as, both the graphic novel and the series and everything, it's not really that hard to understand. It's the graphic novel started out with a murder mystery. Everything escalated, to a point where a Squid Attack happened.
Same thing this one, right?
The same thing with this one and everything, a murder happened in the beginning, and then, we got the escalation, at the end with Lady True and everything, same thing, it's simple stuff. One thing I did want to address too, how about the PD files, man? How great are those things, man?
I felt like I said, it felt like another parallel for the graphic novel. And it was a perfect way to do it. Having an in-media character that was sort of tertiary for most of the show.
Right.
Just like Hollis Mason.
Right.
Sort of a tertiary character for most of the show. And getting their perspective and their collation of data. Super interesting. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and declare it just because I guess there's no authority anymore where we live in a Watchmen anarchy. Dale Petey was Mr. Lube. And that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah,
it definitely was putting that to bed. There's nobody's in charge of the canon anymore. This is the truth.
Yeah. I mean, it was those files every week to have them like debut. So number one, you get excited about watching the episode every week. So it was something to look forward to, something to actually get on social media, actually interact with folks to talk about. It's a great thing when you have a show where a lot of people could discuss and, deep dive and go on Reddit and, talk about theories and everything. That's just such a great thing that happens. But after the episode airs, the next morning, you get more information that parallels the show. That's sort of like, gets integrated with the show. And I was listening to Damon Lindelof's podcast, because he has 3 different podcasts that talk about the show itself and how him and his writers are actually writing these external material to complement the show. That's such a great thing to give dedicated watchers, dedicated people who love this material to keep it going and everything, and to interact and talk with those about those things to find out about the big blue and find out what Excalibur and everything to see how that's made and everything and the reasons why it was made.
Right.
Dan was jealous. I mean, right. So he decided to get back and make a big blue.
This was mostly a joke, but now it's important. Now it's useful. I want to along these lines, because this Watchmen is almost like, I don't want to call it a fanfic because it's not that, but it's an update, it's an adaptation. So a little bit, there's a little, these people, their fandom, right? The creators' fandom.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the juxtaposition of these 8 episodes and the 6 episodes we got from Game of Thrones in 2019. And I want to talk about, when we talk about loving source material and we talk about echoing source material, think about how much better Watchmen was than that particular season of Game of Thrones. and think about what would have been needed to fix Game of Thrones was just the editorial care that was shown in Watchmen. That's it.
Well, okay, that was very. So basically, I guess it's like putting love and care into your child and everything. Mm-hmm. If you put love and care into something, you're going to get the best out of it.
And if you're just sick of your kid,
if you're just sick of your kid, you're going to get a dick.
I mean, I guess that's kind of how it is. That's the thing, is that I feel like HBO sort of owed us a little bit after.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it like not like me personally, like they owe me something, but they owe genre fans something after how Game of Thrones sort of went sideways for big picture reasons, and certainly not the fault of any of the actors, performers, people that worked on it, people that did the effects, people that came up with the stuff. Like, none of those people are at fault, right?
But you spend like 8 years investing in a series like that. You come back to it week after week, and I love that show.
Yeah.
I loved it all the way up until like the very last few episodes and everything. And I guess it would be hypocritical for me to say that if Damon Lindelof could end off Lost in a way where it's not everyone is satisfied, and I keep telling people, well, it's a journey, it's a journey, it's a journey. I can tell people with the game, I can't say the same thing with Game of Thrones, where I hated the ending and everything, but the journey and everything was incredible, because it was. You can't take away those feelings that you had every week, deep diving into events that happened, because at that point you never knew how the end was going to happen. Mm-hmm. The episode where they first fought the White Walkers,
right?
John discovered that my dude, the Night King, was able to raise the dead.
Yeah.
Hardhome and everything. Yeah. So I mean, you can't escape those great moments and stuff. Just because the end ended up crappy. So in that sense, it is all about the journey, and sticking the landing is such a hard thing. Mm-hmm. We weren't really blessed to have the Watchmen around, Watchmen TV show around that long to get to that point, because with this one and done type of thing, well, we hope it's not one and done, but at this point it seems like it is. It's just these 9 episodes that we're just going to have to hold dear.
Yep.
And
I think that I think it's a lot harder to end things right than I think we knew 20 years ago or 15 years ago. And I think we've seen that, like Return of the King, for instance, is probably the gold standard now, in my opinion. Excellent. Episode 6, Star Wars Episode 6. Again, I think you have to raise these episodes in your estimation, these finales. If you think about this graphic novel series as one piece of art altogether, I think that it tells you the whole story you need to know and leaves you with enough ambiguity at the end to speculate further, which is effectively the perfect time to cut the narrative off, which is gotta factor into this, because again, this piece of art was such a labor of love for all of these people that the only reason, apart from HBO canceling it for money, which I know that's not the case because they got plenty of money,
right?
But the only reason that it would not make sense to move forward is if they were simply satisfied with what they produced. And if that's the case, I just hope that somebody gets that band back together and hands them a property, in the Warner Brothers arsenal, in the DC arsenal, that they can do something like this with, where they can take it and make it their own. And then maybe that can run for a longer period of time. And maybe this was just the laboratory where they had to see if, how does this perspective look on the screen, and how are people going to react to that perspective? And we're going to use a property that we know. Maybe next time we can get something even a little bit more original and even a little bit more, interesting.
Well, you bring up a really great point, because the problem with Watchmen is that it doesn't, the way it's constructed, the way that Moore and them ended off that graphic novel with Rorschach, his journal being taken off the pile and everything, and the ambiguity of, or is everyone going to find out, is the secret going to be exposed that it was all a hoax? We don't know. Right. And the way that this series ended off, that Angela, did she really get the power, of Dr. Manhattan, before her feet touched the, the water and everything. So we got both of those, both endings are, ambiguous, to a point where, the problem with this is that you have to be really creative to keep that creativity going, and not dilute Watchmen, so when you end it off like this, is you just can't keep it going. You just can't really do that. I mean, unless Alan Moore just says that, okay, well, I love what Damon, did. Let me try to expound on that. Even he, I just think that you
Alan
just
Moore,
leave it there.
Alan Moore ain't riding on anyone else's coattails.
No,
I don't think Alan Moore's coming back to this.
Not at all. I don't think Damon wants to ride on his own coattails. He wants to ride off in his own sunset. I did my work. I came and shot, and I'm leaving. Like the man in the Man in Black and everything. I'm done. So while HBO and while the Warner Brothers as a corporation will love to have this series and everything continue, I don't see why they should, because the material itself doesn't lend itself to continuous, a continuous narrative. Now, what I was thinking, I wouldn't be opposed to HBO redoing the first 12 issues as a whole miniseries. 12 episodes, just redoing it, the right way versus what happened with this whole Zack Snyder movie. Just do it so I can actually see this on television, because that's what I thought Damon was going to do when they first announced Watchmen and everything. Right. But he ended up going in a whole different, type of thing, which I'm glad he did. But I wouldn't be opposed to that. Yeah.
Show me some, B-level DC miniseries once a year like this, blow it out, change everything around about it, and that would be cool too. Everything HBO does is pretty cool. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and act like I'm not. They know how to pick their projects. They definitely do. This one was one we were excited about the whole time after it had been announced, and we obviously planned to do this show, and it's a bit of a bummer for us.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a bummer for us that it's over so soon. But we feel like we've done justice to our obsession with the source material. As you can see, we're both just we love the comic, and even though this particular series is ending, one thing that I know is we've come a long way as far as our technology even, and so for me, I feel like our series was successful too, which is which feels really, really nice. I feel like even if the audience doesn't agree, and guys, we love you, but I don't care about you in this case, I feel like we put together a good product for ourselves, and that's something I'm proud of. So, Sam, to you, congratulations. We did it.
You as well.
We did the whole thing.
We did the whole thing. Remember how we started off? We started off with the first issue. And was like, let's pray that this HBO show is actually some good.
And this is such a we weren't doing videos before. We kind of changed a few things around, reconfigured a few things. I bought a few things on my side that were holding us up. And I was recording a lot of those shows under a blanket down here over on the other side because I couldn't figure out how to set the gain on my other mic. So I couldn't turn it down so you couldn't hear my wife talking to her mom on the phone across the house.
We got some really good conversations out of those, man. I mean, revisiting that whole graphic novel was just a great experience for me because, I read it like dozens of times, but still found some things because of talking with you, that I didn't see before. You know what I'm saying? It was stuff that every time you read that graphic novel is something that's always pops out at you. That's something that's different, and you just appreciate the complexities of, the whole Watchmen universe, period.
And, thank you so much to, this being a series finale, this being the end of the Sam and Scott are watching Watchmen's for now. Thank you so much to everybody who has, supported us as we did all this, everything from those podcast recordings to our time at Comic-Con. Thank you so much to the people, even the guys around our booth. Appreciate you so much. To my wife, Holly, who actually read this graphic novel, which is her first like comic book of all time.
Oh man, so that
You know,
yeah, we still and so Scott is talking about the end and everything. It's still a
yeah.
couple things we want to
Oh,
do. You know, we still want to talk about Watchmen.
oh yeah.
So we will still be doing like getting Holly on because we kept talking
Yeah.
about getting her on,
But I mean, this will
talking about the series and everything.
this will be
And
this is the
then
last like you know
yeah, but
episode. You
this
know what
is
I'm saying?
the as far as the actual show, yeah, this is actual this is pretty much it. We still want to talk about Doomsday
Oh,
and
we're gonna do all that
ancillary
stuff.
series and
So
everything.
before I say
Um
anything else, the Nerdcyclopedia ain't going nowhere. And you know, if you've come to us for this analysis and you like it, you know, you can subscribe here. And the YouTube channel is sort of interesting because it's gonna have it's like the omnibus feed for all of our content. You know, as we go forward from here, I know we're going to be doing more things like you were saying, Sam. We're going to have people on and talk about even Watchmen and other things. I know Holly actually is really into Star Wars now because of Baby Yoda. So
oh man,
she's gonna
I gotta get my wife into it,
she might
man.
even be writing an article for us. She got the one of the
Uh-oh.
Darth Bane books on
Yeah.
audiobook and she really loved it.
Uh-oh.
So she's probably going to write us a little review
Okay.
there. You know, I'm excited because
Okay.
I think, you know, we're probably going to be doing Westworld this year, which is also a super duper complicated form of art. And it's, you know, genre science fiction's excellent. I think, you know, if you've seen our other reviews for our Star Wars stuff, you know, we're looking at having maybe some of those guys come on too. So, if you want a little bit more sugar, a little more sweet, a little less sour, we'll have some of that for you.
Yep, we will.
I'm looking to do more as far as the Nobody Cares series. I know I piloted that, but I've been sort of, you know, busy lately.
We'll get it together.
We're gonna get all that stuff together, and you know, the future's bright for the channel for sure. And
Yes,
the fact that we were able to bring this to completion and be satisfied essentially with the entire output. Like, there's not a single episode we did that I'm like, don't listen to that one. I feel very proud of everything we've done here, and I'm really happy.
Great material to be passionate about, and I think we've done an excellent job. You know, I'm going to pat. If you're not going to pat yourself on the back, I will. I will pat myself and you on the back when I see you. You know, so yeah, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for all the commenters that have chatted with us. As we've talked about the episodes right after directly with the lives and everything.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. And like Scott said, we will be back with more Nerdcyclopedia stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you to our guests, Daniel Kibblesmith, Dr. Jeremy Lawrence, Dan Ickes, everybody that came on and shared their feedback. Wouldn't have been as much fun anyway. I guess we could have done it without you, but it wouldn't be fun. Yep, it wouldn't be as cool.
Ken came on. Yeah,
Ken was on the show.
Yeah, you'll see him on the Westworld stuff.
Yeah, he's gonna come on our Westworld show. We're looking at doing a few things with some other genre stuff. I've been real into The Expanse lately, so look forward to hearing more from me about that. Just like everybody else I know.
I got to get into it. So yeah.
Hey, it's good. It picks up speed. You gotta. It's just like The Wire, guys. This is the pitch. You ready for this? Here's the pitch. It doesn't hold your hand. It's like The Wire and Game of Thrones had a baby with Firefly.
Uh-oh. Hey, I'm on board. So that's enough to sold me. How about you guys?
Anyway, that's the best sale job I'll do today. So
there we go.
So that is that, and obviously you can catch us at Nerdcyclopedia for our mainline show. Now that we have fewer reviews to do, look for some more flagship episodes in the near future where we talk about things we want to talk about. Consarn it.
Yep.
Sam, anything else you got for the lovely people of the audience?
Nothing much. Just keep watching. We'll be back soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, I promise you this. If they do make a season 2 of Watchmen, we will be here. And if they announce a season 2 of Watchmen, I am throwing a party on this channel. We will have a good time. We'll have a celebration. Sign off because until they come back and make some more of these, I'm Scott.
And I'm Sam.
And we watched Watchmen. See ya.
Yep. Peace.